SavvyBusinessRadio.com, home to over 500,000 global listeners via our podcast and AM/FM platforms. We help business owners connect to successful individuals who share their gifts with the world. Get your message out in a bigger way with Savvy's live, professionally recorded shows. Find out more at SavvyBusinessRadio.com.
Our first guest today is Dave Kerpen. He shares his latest book, The Art of People, 11 Simple People Skills That Will Get You Everything You Want. Find out more about Dave at his website at davekerpen.com. Our second guest is Susan Bremer O'Neill. She shares her insights on building self-confidence, power, and courage. Find out more about Susan at selfappeal.com. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. This is your host, Christina Nitschman. Each week on Savvy, we support successful individuals in sharing their expertise, knowledge, tips, and stories with the world. Hi, Dave. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous. And as I said prior to the interview, I'm very blessed that my wonderful friend at Random House just happened to pull your book off their bookshelf and said, I think you're going to really, really enjoy this book, The Art of People, 11 Simple People Skills That Will Get You Everything You Want. And very important for a small business like myself and many other listeners out there who are also trying to grow their business. And I learned quite a bit reading your book. How did it come about for you that you decided to write this book?
Well, my first book was called Likeable Social Media, and I wrote about all the principles that apply to doing social media well. And then I realized as I spoke about that book around the world, that a lot of the principles of likable social media, things like listening, gratitude, authenticity, transparency, responsiveness, don't just apply to social media, but they apply to business. So my second book was Likeable Business, and I wrote about how these principles applied to the business world as well. Well, same thing happened. As I was speaking around the world about likable business, I realized that all these things that I had experienced and written about and studied from great leaders weren't just things that applied to social media or even business. They just simply applied to life, and getting what you want in relationships with people at work and at home is so much about these things that I thought, let me do something that's as broad as possible that will really help as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm. And it certainly is. And what I love, Dave, is you mentioned in the beginning of your book how you started this journey with a simple learning of the Enneagram, which actually many years ago, my friend tried out on me, and I was totally not interested in answering the hundreds of questions she put before me. And she's like, no, I'll ask you the question, just answer me. It was really insightful to understand greater how I operate, what are my communication ways of understanding the world and communicating with others. That was really insightful.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I stumbled upon the Enneagram a few years ago now, and look, personality tests are obviously somewhat limited in as much as how much can you really tell by answering a whole bunch of questions. But for me, I find it extremely valuable. I've now administered it to over 150 people in our businesses, and we use it all the time to help. Our managers use it to help better understand their staff and manage them well. Mm-hmm. And so I am a huge fan of the Enneagram, and there is a lot of data that points out to the Enneagram being more reliable than even Myers-Briggs or DISC or some assessments that are used a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting? I took it many years ago, and I came out as a 7 with an 8 wing, and I was really disappointed. I wanted to be an 8, Someone I felt that was really powerful and strong and inspired others. That was my impression of it. But as my friends say, they all say, you're so enthusiastic. That is totally you, a 7, a cheerleader, as they say. But this time around, I decided to do it and let everyone, I'm going to let everyone know now that actually there is a personal assessment Enneagram in the end of your book, which I took again. And I was a 7 with, it was not an 8 this time. I think it might have been a 4. But I was like, whoa, wait a second. Does people's personality change as you grow? I mean, what have you experienced working with people?
No, I mean, one of the nice things about the Enneagram is it is actually more reliable than other assessments. And so ultimately, it shouldn't change over time. And in fact, the key is really the first number. It's much, much more important than the second number. So you are still very likely a 7 with 8 wing, and but you have some elements of 4 in you. But look, we all have elements of all of them in us, and it's just a matter of how strong each of those things are.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I really, really pulled, and I'm going to let everyone know here that at the end of each chapter starts with kind of a lesson and kind of your personal experience of here's what I went through, here's what I learned in, say, listening or authenticity. And then you offer different ways in which people can do action steps to apply it into their lives. And some of the things that really stood out for me that I really liked, and I've heard about it before, is being grateful, keeping a journal of that, and really keeping a note of what to be grateful for, even the small stuff. But one thing I hadn't ever thought about was sending thank you cards just to people that make a difference in your life that you just don't pay attention to or give credit to on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, gratitude is, I would say, of everything in the book, that's the most important single concept to me there, and it's extremely powerful. I believe that gratitude is the best drug on the planet. There's just no ill side effects, and it just makes you feel better. And handwritten thank you cards are doubly powerful because people end up getting them, and I think people are super surprised to get a handwritten thank you card in today's day and age, especially when it's not after a gift, but really just because. But really, just as you're writing out the thank you cards, it's amazing how your mood shifts from bad to good to great to ecstatic, depending on how you were before you wrote that thank you card. And there's just dozens of examples of successful people sending thank you cards. So it's something I would urge people to give a shot to. And, it doesn't happen overnight. You start with one a week, and then, try one a day. And then, you're ready to step up, you can do more.
Yeah, and you're right about that. Sometimes just taking that extra time just to remember someone in your life that you don't really give thanks to will make all the difference. I know I had started a meetup group several years ago, and out of the blue, one of the meetup members sent me a card, and in the card was a meetup picture of all of us enjoying our time at our meetup. And she said, "Thank you so much for putting this community together. It makes all the difference." And it made my day. It really, really did, for her to remember and to point out to me that, yeah, we're grateful that you've put this community together and that we get to come together.
That's awesome. Yeah, and people just don't forget those sorts of things. So, it's extremely powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing you mentioned was authenticity, which is thrown around a lot these days, authenticity, how important it is. What does that mean for you? Because I know people throw it out, you have to be authentic. What does that mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to explain, and it's pretty much impossible to defend against when you're not being authentic, right? It's like when people say you're being defensive, you can't defend yourself because then you're being defensive about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, ultimately, it's really just about being yourself and not putting on an air, and being honest and transparent, and and not just being yourself. And I think so many of us hide. We have all these different masks that we wear in different times to try to be people that we're not, whether it's at work or on a date or in a relationship or with our boss or with our clients. And ultimately, when we are our authentic self, and especially when we're even our vulnerable selves, that's extremely powerful. It's extremely powerful. I was giving a speech the other day, and I was really nervous because I was going to be talking about some failures. And it was in front of a group of people that already, many of them knew me, and they knew me to be super successful business person, et cetera, et cetera. And so as I approached giving the speech, I was really nervous because I was like, if I'm honest about my recent failure, like, how will they react? Will they think less of me? Will they, look down upon me? And of course, I had to, ultimately go with being authentic and being really vulnerable. And it was just a tremendous success. It was probably the best rated speech I've ever given, and people just absolutely loved it and were so moved. So I just, and obviously no one really thought the less of me. If anything, they thought better of me. So I think that we're so nervous to be our authentic selves, and we're even more nervous to be vulnerable in certain settings. But the time and time again, we see that when we are authentic and vulnerable, people really do respond positively.
Absolutely. I mean, I know many years ago, it was funny, in junior high, there was a girl I really, really liked and admired. And so I thought one day, you know what, I'm just going to become her. I studied her every movement, how she talked, how she walked. I went home and modeled it. And then when I thought I had it perfect, I started to put it into my life. And it was funny. People immediately noticed I wasn't being myself, and I turned people off. I actually didn't make friends like she did. She was very, very popular. I actually pushed people away. And one person actually came up to me one day and actually said, "Why are you being so-and-so?" Like, they actually knew who I was copying. It actually backfired hugely and did not help me at all. So I can totally see what you're saying. People know when you're not being authentic. Even if they can't pinpoint it, they'll feel it.
It's totally true. They will. People know, and the only place where I suggest anything that would be considered faking it is really just around confidence. And I think sometimes we're not as confident as we could be. And I do have a chapter on what I call WWC. Walking with confidence and the power of when you can walk into a room and really have that confident air about you. But the thing is, look, we're all a little scared, and it's not inauthentic to be confident. It's just a good thing for you.
And actually, I would venture to say that really it's who we really are. There's a couple of people I've met in my business career who were phenomenal people, but they put on an air or an understanding that they could perform in a certain way or in a certain position doing something that they actually couldn't do. They didn't have the goods to perform, but they wanted, I guess they thought in their mind that, hey, people think I should be able to do X, Y, Z, so I'll pretend I can do it. But it actually backfired because then I didn't trust them. Once I realized that, hey, they couldn't do what they said they're doing, I lost all complete respect and trust for them. What your greatest gifts and talents are, I'd say go out there and do it with the greatest confidence. It's not the least bit arrogant to do so. In fact, you're serving the world. But no, and this is what I got when I was reading your book in that particular chapter. I thought the cusp is just remembering that you're not actually faking it, that what you have confidence out there, when you walk in the room, that you can actually deliver on what you say you can do.
Exactly. And confidence is extremely contagious. And so is a lack of confidence. So, it's just confidence adds a lot of value, not only to you, but think about how much value you add to others, given that confidence is contagious. So, think about it this way, for those of you that are sort of nervous about being overly confident. When you are confident, you are doing your network and your associates and your friends and your clients and everyone that you interact with, you're doing them a service. You're actually doing good for them with your confidence.
Yeah. And don't be scared to just strut your best stuff out there. Exactly. And what you really mentioned in the beginning of your book, which I thought was really, and that's why you mentioned the Enneagram, is really getting to understand yourself and, your weaknesses and your strength. And weaknesses are not bad. They're things you can build upon, but just to acknowledge, okay, here's something that might not be my best suit. I've had people, like one guy came on and said, hey, I want to do podcasting just because I think it's something I hear is good for business or getting your word out. And for him, speaking was not his forte. It was not something he's very comfortable with. When we spoke, I said, I think for you, another medium might be better because you're an awesome writer, but speaking wise, I would practice more to get better at it, but I would say going out there right now and launching it might hurt you just because it's not your greatest gift and talent. Writing is. Go with what you're best at.
Yeah, absolutely. Soar with your strengths. I'm all about that. For instance, people have told me I have a really great face for radio, and that's why I do podcasts like this. But I am definitely a fan of soaring with your strengths, and not necessarily trying to correct your weaknesses, but understanding them and then figuring out how you can work around them based on, your employees and your colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think sometimes, I know about myself, I'm not very techie. So in the beginning, I tried to build my website, I tried to do all this technical stuff. And running a business, then you just have yourself breaking down, wasting your time, not building actions that help you bring money into the company. Instead, you're wasting time doing things you're really not good at. And in those cases, I think I recall you just mentioning, and I've heard in other places, get the help you need for people who are really an expert in those particular areas so that you're not struggling.
Exactly. You waste a lot of mental energy trying to change your weaknesses. And the thing is, usually it doesn't end up happening anyway. So much better to accept yourself, understand yourself for who you are, soar with your strengths, and figure out a way. Obviously, I'm not saying ignore your weaknesses. On the contrary, figure out a way that you can, based on your weaknesses, get what you need to get done.
Yeah. And also by acknowledging, hey, I'm not good at techie stuff myself, then I know, okay, I don't need to focus on that. I can give that to someone who's awesome at it and give them something that will not only bring them income, but get it off my plate.
Exactly. No, the more we understanding is such a huge part of everything. Understanding yourself, understanding others, and once you have that understanding, that's you're halfway there.
And what for you would you define leadership?
So, I mean, I have a very broad definition of leadership that I write about in The Art of People. I believe that we all can be leaders in one way or another. Anyone that is influencing others in any sort of group setting is a leader. So, obviously any business owner is a leader, but really any head of household in a family is a leader. Any manager on a team is a leader. Anyone that is part of an organization and takes a leadership role in that organization is a leader. And so I think that we just about all of us have opportunities to become leaders at one point or another in our life, or in one facet of our life, and we can and should embrace what that means.
Yeah, I really loved that definition when I read about it in your book, because people I've met will say, well, I'm just a mother. And I'm like, just growing up a kid to be a phenomenal human being in society, that is no small task, and that is awesome leadership. And to acknowledge, here's where your greater gifts are in this field, in this area, and this is where I'm a leader, and acknowledging it and stepping up and saying it's okay for me to take the reins of this and say, yes, I am a leader in this.
Yeah, and it's okay, by the way, to be a leader and not have a lot of experience or leadership training. I mean, how many of us really have that, right? I mean, it's like they don't teach leadership in school. They don't teach leadership, in college even, so we all many of us end up leaders at one point or another, and until the first experience, we haven't had any leadership experience. So we're all figuring out as we go, and the more you practice it, like anything, the more you practice it, the better you'll get.
Yeah. And that's what I really pulled from reading your whole story. And it was great that you were so vulnerable and shared all the bits and pieces of how you grew as a person, first being in sales and then growing your own businesses and growing them larger, and then going on to different businesses that reflected where you are at that moment. What I really took away and what really drew me to your book was the title, because being in business, when I first started, one of the first things I got is I'm going to go to as many places as possible to get people to know who I am and what valued service I might have. Now, how I did in the beginning, how many business owners did it, is you come with as many business cards as possible and throw them out to as many people as possible. I found that it didn't work. I found disillusioned, and I didn't know any of the people when I got home. I just had a slew of business cards, and it drove me nuts. And that's kind of the reason I started that meetup that I mentioned prior, is that I just wanted to have a community of business owners that we connect and help each other grow. But what I liked about your book is it really shows that if you put out first, what is it that you're looking to help someone else about? What are their needs? How can I serve them first, instead of coming at it from, here's what I have, buy my stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of what I write about in The Art of People is being other focused, and how can I help you focused and other centric. I think that there's just a lot of evidence that when we put ourselves first, we end up last, and when we put others first, we end up first. Yeah. Now that you can take this to an extreme. There are some people that are martyrs and are just always taking care of others and never taking care of themselves. And to be clear, I am not suggesting martyrdom. So those twos out there, for anyone that knows the Enneagram, should not take what I'm saying to mean that you should always exclusively be in the business of helping others. But that being said, I do think so many business owners and salespeople are a little still too focused on, what they want to sell, and less focused on what the other person, really wants and needs.
It's a really, really tight line to stay on. I mean, when I first got started, I did the card passing out, buy my stuff. Oh my gosh, I can help you. And then I went to the opposite end of the spectrum where I'm sitting there for hours just talking about people's problems on the phone and not making a sale. And of course, that tied into a number of other issues I had with one being nervous or feeling that I wasn't worthy to close a sale. And that's just a whole other chat. But what I found is that also for a number of people, I think it's important to touch on the energy of really coming from the space of service. Not so much martyrdom, as you said, but service, real service to want to serve other human beings and first. Because I've had people who said, okay, I'm going to say when I meet you at an event, how may I serve you? But then really they're more about taking. So it's really, what is the energy behind it, to pay attention where you're coming from at a specific time. Are you really coming from a place of service? Or are you coming from a place of fear and still wanting to get something out of the other person?
Yeah, and I have a chapter in the book, right? The most important words that you'll ever say in a meeting, and those words are very simple. How can I help you? Mm-hmm. And I had just a terrific experience with a guy by the name of Michael Kislin, who is a financial advisor, and being as out there as I am in terms of social media and being available to the world, I get quite a few salespeople soliciting me every single day, and probably the biggest culprits are real estate and financial, reaching out to me all the time. And Michael had a little bit of a different pitch. He wrote me an email saying that he'd like just 15 minutes of my time, and he promises he won't try to sell me anything, and he has just one question for me. And so I said, all right, I'll meet with you. And we got together. He came to my office, and he said, his one question was, how can I help you? He gave me a little context, which was really great too, by the way, because sometimes how can I help you can be overwhelming and less helpful. He actually said, for instance, I know you're in technology. I know a lot of people in technology, CEOs, entrepreneurs, investors. I said, actually, I'm raising some capital right now, and if you could introduce me to some venture capitalists, that might be very helpful. And he said, sure, no problem. And I said, so tell me about, your spiel. What is it that you do? And he said, nope, I promise, no sales pitch, so you're not going to get it from me. No way. Aww. And, he was really authentic about that, and he did make that introduction. And a year later, when I had a need for a financial planner, I called him up and I hired him. And I didn't hire him because he was pitching me hard. I hired him because he had established himself as someone that wanted to be helpful first and of service first, as you said.
And here's something you touched on so important. I remember that story in your book. That was so enlightening because I think sometimes we can lose touch. We're like, okay, I want to help you, but you're not thinking, is the help I'm going to give you or want to give you something you want? And so he started with the context of, how may I help you, or can I help you? And then here's a number of ways maybe I could help you. What do you think? And then let you tell him what you really need. Because sometimes with myself, I made the mistake myself of thinking I might know what you want and say, here's what I have to offer you. And instead they're like, well, that's not really what I need. What I love about your friend here, who became your then consultant, is that he really took the time to really get to hear and know what you specifically need and offer that.
Exactly. And how can I help you in a vacuum? Like I said, it's kind of overwhelming and sometimes not even helpful. I mean, it's like, I don't know how you can help me. You tell me. But when there's a little context, it can actually go a long way.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And along those lines, if I can help any of your listeners by tweeting any of their articles or books out to my very large following, they should send me a tweet and mention this show, and I'm happy to help them get the word out about what their various businesses and books and articles are.
Oh, thank you, Dave. And what you just mentioned prior about, getting together and helping people, you do something that's very unique, because you mentioned don't be a martyr. Just don't go out there and help people all day long and you're not really building your business, because then you can't help people at all if you're not bringing money in and making your business profitable. But you do something very unique, and that is you bulk your days, and you have, I believe, one day every Thursday or so where you spend just a specific amount of time helping people or business owners that may have a question, and you designate that time alone for them. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I want it to be able to be helpful, but like you said, there's helpful and there's martyrdom. And one of my great investors and advisors, Vern Harnish, one of the founders of Entrepreneurs Organization, he said to me once, you could tell a lot about your entire business strategy by looking at your calendar for the week. And I looked at my calendar, and there were all these random meetings with people that just wanted some help with various things. And so I needed to clean that up. So I created office hours. And yeah, like you said, every Thursday from 4 to 5, I meet with anyone in the world that wants to meet with me. So if anyone listening wants to meet with me about anything at all, you can schedule it, or just go to scheduledave.com and schedule time with me in my office hours. Now, there is a very long wait now, obviously, and unfortunately. So you have to be patient, but I'm happy to chat and be helpful with anyone that I can. And this way, this protects the rest of my day and keeps me from getting too distracted and focusing on what's really most important to me.
Absolutely. And I know myself and many others listening and have done the same thing, where you stretch your time so much that you don't spend time with yourself and with your loved ones because you're stretching your time too thin. And this is the perfect solution to be able to give in a way that doesn't, have you being a martyr, but at the same time allows you to be of service. And what I really, really like, Dave, is you mentioning earlier on about talking about failures. And I don't think that gets enough attention, that actually I see failures as lessons towards success. Or I think I had heard someone say in a couple shows back that came here that Edison had seen that he didn't have failure so much as that he was getting one step closer to success. How has your experience changed with failures now that you've been more vulnerable, shared it? How do you see failures now?
Well, to be honest, I hate failure, I wish I could say that there's no such thing as failure and that every failure is learning. And to me, failure is failure and it sucks. But it doesn't mean that it can't be a learning experience and we can't move on. And the thing is, failure really isn't the problem. The problem is fear of failure. So the problem is that failure leads to fear of failure, which leads to lack of action. So the thing is, failure sucks. That's okay. It's okay for it to suck. And it's important to, 1, learn from it, and then 2, let it go and move on and keep risking more failure, because otherwise you won't do anything great and you won't really get what you want.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And something just to add on to what you just said prior about your one day that you that you put aside to help people, is that you said the waiting list is quite large because there's a lot of demand and people want your time. But one thing I realized myself, I started to do what you are doing as well in my own scheduling, and it's been quite helpful, is that the tire kickers, or the people who weren't interested in my time, fell off and decided, I'm not going to do it. They just got themselves off the schedule. And did you find the same thing?
Totally, absolutely, and it's very valuable. And most of the sessions that I end up having are people that are extremely grateful and excited, and those sessions end up being very, very valuable. The other thing that happens is you kind of get to understand people. It helps other people put your time in perspective too. So somebody just reached out to me and I said, happy to help. Here are my office hours as long as you can wait, I look forward to chatting. And, he wrote back like, there's nothing for 5 months. Don't you have anything sooner? and I responded, I said, well, if it's urgent, I'm happy to meet with you sooner. Is it urgent? And it wasn't urgent. So how could he say it was, and it's like, people want to be on their own. People think everyone has their own filter, so they think about their own needs. But it's like if I met with everyone that asked me all the time, I literally would have no time at all for myself and my family. And so I think it's helpful for people gives them some perspective. And yeah, the ones that really need your time will wait. And if it's really urgent, they'll let you know, and you can assess, whether it's important to meet with them sooner.
Yeah, it really just establishes, I feel, boundaries. And then on the other hand, what you kind of just hinted at, and I felt, was that it also allows them to show respect for your time and effort, because you're not just giving it to them whenever they want. You're saying, here's my specific times. If it's something important to you, then I'm glad to help you. And if it's really urgent, let me know, and then we'll work on something. But it just really establishes boundaries, which is very important for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, look, time is absolutely our most precious asset in life. That's it, unless you have Bill Gates level money. I mean, if you have billions, then maybe your time, your money is more valuable than time. But I don't think so. I mean, for just about all of us, our time, the time that we have left on this planet, is more precious than any other material items that we could have. So I think that we have to be respectful of each other's time and really honor that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been so fascinating chatting with you today, Dave. Let everyone know where they can get a copy of your wonderful book, The Art of People, and find out more about you.
Sure. Well, I'm super easy to find, and the book is super easy to find. It's in bookstores everywhere, and Amazon, of course. And I do have a money-back guarantee. I don't know how many authors do that, but if anyone buys the book and doesn't like it, you can simply tweet me at Dave Kerpen, my name, and give me your address, and I will send you a check for the cost of the book. And you don't even need to send me the book back. So I want as many people out there to give it a shot and hope for it to help them. And yeah, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can hit me up on pretty much every social network. I'm on all of them. And it's just my name, Dave Kerpen. And then we've got a couple of companies, one that works with big brands, Likeable Media, and then one that works with small businesses, Likeable Local. And if either of those companies can be helpful for you too, you should check them out online.
Fabulous, fabulous. And I can't imagine anyone not getting super value from your wonderful book, The Art of People. I did myself, and I know I can't imagine anyone not, but it's wonderful that you put that out there. Not many businesses do give that stamp of, if you're not absolutely completely happy, we'll give you a return. And that's something that shows great integrity in what you're doing out there. So thank you, Dave.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's kind of ironic because I don't actually make the money when you buy the book anyway. You buy the book from Amazon or from a bookstore, and I'm offering the money back, but I'm not getting the money in the first place. So I do think it's relatively unique, but I'm happy to do it. And no one's hit me up yet for The Art of People, and only twice for any of my previous books has that been the case. So far, so good.
Well, thank you so much, Dave, for being so completely transparent, vulnerable, and sharing your greatest gifts with our audience. Thank you for coming to Savvy Business Radio.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hi, Susan. Welcome back to Savvy Business Radio. How are you today?
Oh, Christina, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, you betcha. I mean, the first interview we had, I wasn't able to get to your wonderful book, From Sex Appeal to Self-Appeal. It was a wonderful book. And after we had our wonderful interview, you said, I'm going to send you the book, read it. And then we got to talking, and we thought there was so much we didn't cover in our first interview. Namely, most of our listeners are women, 75% women, around our age, from 40s to 50s. And they're going through a lot of turmoil and changes in their lives. And really, at this time, I find a lot of women who have been very successful maybe in their careers and such, but now are starting to feel like my life is changing. Where do I fit in? Their self-confidence might be waning. And they start to feel, hey, I'm not just as beautiful as I used to be in my 20s. I'm getting a little saggy. I'm not feeling as sensual, perhaps. So we're going to tap into all of that. But before we go there, share a little bit with our audience briefly about your background. What led you to writing From Sex Appeal to Self-Appeal?
Certainly. I will also say that I am in that same boat. Things are sagging, and every day it is my own journey to feel really good about who I am. I have a degree in laser technology, and I worked in science for about 12 years, but at that time I was also a substance abuser. And it was after I put the substances away, mainly drugs and alcohol, and I became a sober woman, that I realized I wasn't happy with what I was doing. And there were a lot of twists and turns in how it all happened. But basically, I was pointed in the direction of being an exotic dancer. And I was about 30, almost 35 when I went in for my first audition. And what I saw, Christina, was everything that I wasn't doing in my job. In my job, I was wearing jeans and a hard hat to work like one of the boys, and it was very mind-oriented, very technical. And in that club, I saw women, to me, it looked like they were playing dress-up. They were wearing evening gowns and cocktail dresses and jewelry. They had jewelry and makeup, and they looked beautiful, and the men were giving them attention. It was a very, very safe, beautiful place. And basically, I just found that it looked like fun. So I started doing both jobs, and then I quit the high-tech job and strictly was an exotic dancer for 8 to 10 years. And it was in that time then that I really had to grow up and change. And that's the bulk of my book, is about the journey that I went through in order to develop my own self-appeal, in order to really start to be a woman with morals and to feel really good about my body and my sexuality, all things that I had really never been conscious of, and I'd never been embracing of. So that's a very quick overview.
No, I get you, Susan. And it's interesting, the sexuality part in my 20s, I can't say I was very comfortable with that either. And it's funny, in my 20s, I was very into, if you look at the movies I liked, they were very Hollywood guy, knight in shining armor on a big horse, come save me type of stories that I was attracted to, you know, Cinderella type idea of, knight in shining armor is going to save me someday and life will be grand and perfect. And it wasn't even about the money. It was just that life would be perfect. A number of my friends would get married and be like, wait a second, this is not what I signed up for. This is hard work. This isn't like a bowl of cherries. And I, in my 20s, through my 20s, looking for that perfect man and not finding it. And then my 30s saying, I'm swearing off all men. It's not working out. And I think for the first to 36, from 30 to 36, I didn't date. I was just like, I'm enough, no more dating. I'm just going to concentrate on building my career. And I'm going to work my way up to VP of finance or something and make huge sums of money and be independent. And then I found that wasn't the answer. And then in my 30s thought, hey, I want to share this life with someone. I want a companion. And I started looking for a companion and praying about it and getting quite frustrated. I wasn't finding it. But now, as when we started the conversation, now hitting my late 40s and feeling like I'm going through another change, I feel more comfortable as me as a person, my mind and my spirit. But sometimes my body gets left out because it's changing drastically, even though, you know, really how I'm eating hasn't changed all that much. But I'm not feeling as beautiful sensually. And how has it worked out for you as a woman, say in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and now, you know, coming to, you know, where you are today? What has been the transition for you?
Oh, I will always be working through them. And I don't think I've done anything smooth in my life. And I want to say, you know, I was taking just a couple notes. It's interesting when I was looking, which I did in my 20s, for that perfect guy, sort of like that knight, like Hollywood depicts. When you're looking, you just don't find, and when we become our own, you know, when we become the kind of person we want to attract, that's when they finally come into our lives. As far as my transition, in my 20s and into my middle 30s, actually before I became an exotic dancer, I really never thought much about my body or my sexuality. It was something I did, and I think I even write in my book, you know, relationship or encounters, sexual encounters, sort of spontaneously combusted, and you know, I'd see that really, really great, that hot guy, and then, you know, we'd be on, and then of course I thought a relationship would develop from that, and it never did. That's not in my experience how relationships develop, but after. You know, in the book, I write about the many awarenesses I had about my own body and my own sexuality, and coming through that strip club experience and then meeting this really great guy. And I did similar to you. It's not that I didn't date, but I did remain celibate for a year, and I did live alone with my my two cats for like 12 or 13 years because I kept making the mistake of moving in with men, thinking that would really go somewhere, and it never did. And that was in my 20s and 30s. But after I met this really great guy, whom I did not get, hop into bed with right away, we worked on developing a relationship. Well, I had to then learn how, and I'm still learning, quite honestly, how to have an intimate, healthy sexual relationship with him now, with all of the other things that go along with marriage. It's but funny, we think that marriage is going to be great, right? It's going to be perfect, and we get into this thing, and it's like, oh wow, this is a person, and he's got his own ideas, and darn, he doesn't do everything like I do, and what's wrong with him anyway? And all of that just really influences our mind and starts to play. At least it has in my experience with my sexuality. So I want to say, our mind, our brain is our biggest sex organ, and I've really had to learn how to develop this part of me, and as so the transitions haven't been smooth. I seem to battle and fight everything. I still at times think that I'm that woman that used to stand up on the stage with the 35-year-old body and who worked out all the time, and I expect someone else, in this instance my husband, of course, to sort of make that spontaneous sexual energy combustible thing, and he's got his own, he's tired from work and all of this. So I've really had to embrace what is it that makes me feel sexy and sensual, even though my rear end's sagging, my face is, I'm in my 50s, and it's quite interesting, the changes I see happening, and I don't think there's anything I can do about them or anything I want to do.
Yeah. It's fascinating, right?
Part of life.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's fascinating and a really interesting time of my life and your life, I gather, because I'm in my late 40s. And for you, how have you come to finding and creating for yourself that feeling of sensuality, even when you're going through the stage of maybe your body is not as its optimum as it was maybe in its 20s?
I guess for the age that I am, it's optimum. So that's an interesting piece, right? I can look back and say it doesn't look like it did when I was 20, but wearing the clothing that flatters what I do have, and I've said that for years. Also, looking more at the internal characteristics that I've developed. And the one thing, I have to mention this. Yeah. The one thing that I learned when I was a dancer, I talked to thousands of men. There was a lot of talking in my job, and people don't realize that, but there was. And I would look at them, and I would talk sometimes for long periods of time while I was dancing and making money. And the thing that made me very successful, even though often I was the oldest, was that I would give them attention and I would look into their eyes. And that's the thing. If I'm so focused today on how I look, then I don't have the ability to be present and to give my husband what he needs in the moment that he needs it. So there is that. That's what makes us attractive to other people, is how they are mirrored back to themselves in our eyes. Wow. Yeah.
That is so. Yeah. That is so telling, because here I have a number of wonderful women friends, and I find that some of them, I'll look at them and go like, hey, they look, they're talking about themselves like, oh, I feel dumpy and yucky and I gained 20 pounds. And I said, you look great to me. But see, it's not what you really, really look like in the mirror. It's what are you feeling inside that matters. And some of them are disillusioned with their jobs. They're feeling unfulfilled. They're not feeling like they're growing as people. And see, that can make you and change your perspective in this age when your body might be changing, thinking, well, I look pretty shabby, I don't feel good. It's really about coming to, as you did, discovering what are my greatest gifts inside of my soul, inside of my being, that I can accentuate and pay attention to, because that is who my essence is.
The other thing I think is so important for all of us to remember, whether we're in a long-term relationship or whether we're looking for somebody, is this thing a man said to me one night, and I don't write about this. Anyway, I was dancing for him, and we were talking, and he was in there, and the waitresses were giving him drinks, and he was talking about his fiance, and he said, and finally he was talking about her so much, and when they were getting married, and I said to him, why are you in here? And he said, oh, well, I'm in here because it's after work and it's all about me, and somebody brings me drinks, and somebody, dances for me and gives me attention, and da-da-da-da-da. And he said, my fiance is far more beautiful than you.
Whoa.
And then he sort of backtracked, like he was going to hurt my feelings or something. He said, oh, well, she doesn't look like you, but I love her. And that's what we have to remember. See, we see it all the time. Oh, I call it ugly beautiful. Beautiful people who are out there who their essence is, as you phrased it before, and who are just ugly on the outside. And I witnessed this. We had one beautiful young girl who worked there. She was tall. She was, your stereotypical blonde with big boobs and all of this. And she had a hard time connecting with people because when she would dance, I saw her do this. She would look over their head. She was like she was vacant. She wasn't there. And she wasn't as successful as I was being able to give the attention. So, yeah, ugly, beautiful. People in our lives love us.
Yeah.
And they want us to be there for them.
Yeah. And also we've talked about this in the show in the past, especially with women in the 40s to 50 range. If you're having kids at home and you're trying to, keep the family going, keep your husband happy, keep the household running, go to work, blah, blah, blah. Often what gets missed is self-nurture and self-love. And you can't give it to others if you haven't given it to yourselves. And, they come first, my kids come first. But if you get to the point where you're on empty, you're really not giving them your best self, and you're not giving yourself your best self. What is your take on that?
Oh, I totally agree. Matter of fact, it doesn't even matter if you have kids. Kids are wonderful. Don't get me wrong. We have 6 rescue animals, and I have a home, and I'm stereotypical. I actually make lunch for my husband most days, and I get the dinner ready, and all of that with everything else that I'm trying to do within self-appeal, I forget to take care of myself, and it doesn't take a lot. Half an hour, 10 minutes. Something I can do for me, or even just giving that mind a break. A half an hour of something, I like to call it deliciously stupid on television. It's, how do we give ourselves a break, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. For me, one of my absolute favorite things to do is read, walk, and bubble bath. I just love bubble baths. They're so sensual and yummy, and it's just so pampering to me. But for everyone, it'll be their own thing. For yourself and working with other women, what have you found some great ways in which women might start to reclaim their confidence and their beauty back? Because I find more and more of my wonderful, beautiful girlfriends talking about how not beautiful they are, and finding their confidence waning as maybe their careers start to change, and they're like, now what's next in my life? I don't know where to go next.
Well, I would eliminate as much as possible the external criticism coming in. Every day we're bombarded by so many advertising messages that tell us we're not enough, and that's just not true. So subscribe to anything that tells you are perfect the way you are. Optimum, I love that word. And then also, and this may sound counterintuitive to some people in today's world, but I would stay off social media in a sense, because limit it, because this is what happens to me on social media too, is I have an up and down day. I can have an hour of feeling really great, and something happens and my self-esteem may flag. And then I'll go on to social media and I see all these really great things all these people are doing. And it just is one of the ways for me to go into oh gosh, what's wrong with me and what's wrong with my life? And so limiting, if you're finding that happening, of course, limiting social media. The other thing is it's so important. The discomfort or the discontent we're having in life is a real place to start. If we're having those feelings, then let's not dwell in them. Let's actually use that so that we can understand more of what the next thing may be. And we may not know. For example, I do have a client who's transitioning from owning her own business to getting work with somebody else, and she's not exactly sure where to go in what direction, but she knows what she doesn't want, right? So sometimes it's not that we know what we want, we know what we don't want. So then start to explore. And I probably mentioned this last time, but being what I call that scientist of self.
I like that. And I recall 10 years ago getting a good exercise in a self-help book that really got me thinking about, I don't like where I am right now. And the exercise is, what are 20 things that you love to do that maybe you're doing, maybe you're not doing, that doesn't really cost anything? And I was like, okay, well, and then they said you can then list things you do cost and then put it on a ranking scale. But what I found is some of the things I loved most was playing with animals, and I didn't have any pets in my life at the time. And walking and reading a book, talking with friends, all of them are free. And so, it just got me into a realm like, how much of those things I love am I doing and incorporating in my life? And at that point, none of them, because I was so focused on just building a career. I was working 12, 14 hours a day. So I didn't really have time for friendships or hanging out with friends and talking to them and finding out what's new in their life or doing a hobby. So, I mean, that's a really good point. Know yourself first. And if you become so wrapped up and overwhelmed, and as it may be life circumstances or a job, sometimes it helps just to take a step back and say, what are some of the things I used to love as a child that maybe is not in my life right now? Like as a child, I like to finger paint. Maybe buy some finger paints and go wild at home. Just bringing out that child in you.
Oh, exactly. And those are the things, if you talk about something or you think about it and it excites this little flutter in your heart, we're all just these big kids at heart. And I want to touch on too, I love what you said, you were too busy for friendships. Isn't that what we think, right? We think that when we get to the end of something, then we'll have time for it, or when we have this job or this amount of money, then our life will start and we get to do this. Well, you know what? Our life is now and our relationships are now. I finally had to realize that I love making my weekend just full of homey things. I actually love cleaning. I mean, it has to get pretty dirty for me to love cleaning, but I do love cleaning at that stage. And it's peaceful. It's something called active rest. So there's things that you can find to do that also bring you joy, that are maybe something you feel you need to do, but you can turn it into something you want to do as well. That's another piece of staying satisfied, at least.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you mentioned about waiting to then have the friends or the other things in your life that you're now missing, perhaps, or when I get enough money, or when I get the final promotion. And you're right, you're missing out at life, because as my one friend said, you don't know if you'll be here next year. Maybe a number of my friends, actually, I'm late 40s, have passed on, died of cancer or a heart attack, that I know they weren't anticipating leaving at 45 or 40, but they did. So we don't know. Tomorrow is not promised. So waiting until to live your life and have the friends. And you mentioned something else before, Susan, which was really good, is getting out there and just trying something new, playing and such. Because when I went through that exercise 10 years ago, I then started to pick up self-help books here and there, and ventured into trying some new meetups that were self-help oriented and doing crazy internal exercises that at the time were a little uncomfortable, getting me outside of my comfort zone. And just those couple of things I started to do that were different from my ordinary day just started to jolt me awake a little bit and make me more present and realize, what do I really want? And if I don't know what I want, what don't I want, as you mentioned prior? And started to get me clear on who I am, where do I want to go? What is my essence? What is my true love? What brings me passion? What can I not wait to get out of bed and do every day? The actions I started taking by getting more involved in self-help workshops and stuff started to bring that up to the surface.
And these new actions, these new endeavors will be uncomfortable at first. And it's what we have to walk through in order to get to that place of personal power. I was thinking, our bodies, the way that our bodies are, they're made so that in our late teens, 20s, into our early 30s, we women are more geared for childbearing and child rearing and to be attractive to the opposite sex, because that's how our species is perpetuated, is through sex and intimacy in that realm. As we get older, we can let go of some of that focus and really move into the realm of our mind, because our minds are so powerful. And our minds will take us in a direction that we may have never thought of if we just take the focus off the way things used to be and focus on the way things are. We can, when we're taking action, when we're moving into the next piece, and I love your exploration in the self-help realm and doing different meetups, and yes, that's what we all need to do if we find ourselves in a place of being dissatisfied.
Absolutely. And now, where I am now, because I've done a lot of self-reflecting over the past several years, is that I love where I am now, mind, body, and spirit. I know in my 30s, I was a little conflicted, like, I don't want to get older. I want to stay right here. No more older. No 40s. But actually, 40s is awesome. I've really come into my own. Now I'm totally clear on where my passion and gifts are, and I love to live them and breathe them into the world with others and experience them with others. And so I wouldn't go backwards if you asked me to go backwards into my 20s or early 30s, because it was uncomfortable, and I would say not very focused on knowing who I was. And so it's a great time and space to be in. But you are doing some wonderful work helping women get even more in touch with their beauty and courage and confidence. And you created a new course. Share that with everyone.
Oh, certainly. And the name of my new course is Box It Out with Your Inner Critic and Win for More Success. And by success, you get to define what success is, and I actually help you define that while you're in the course. But the reason this came about is because as I was working with women and developing my self-appeal programs, I realized that our inner critic is the biggest barrier to our feeling good about ourselves, to us making changes, to us speaking up, to us getting all the things that we want, and specifically myself as well. So I'm super excited about this. Well, and then that led me into taking boxing. And when I took the boxing, as I'm learning to box, then that just gave me that much more power. So this particular course, I use boxing metaphor, boxing references, and I really use it to help each woman move beyond the self-imposed limitations, because our inner criticism is not necessarily who we are today. It's a lot of jumbled up messages that we've internalized, and many of them aren't true, but yet they keep us stuck. They keep us from taking that positive action. So I needed to do this course as well, because when I wrote my memoir, it took me so long, and there's a lot of things. It's very personal, and it's all about sexuality and stuff in places. And it was 2 years for me to actually get up the courage to even talk about the book after I published it. So I had to work through my own inner criticism in order to get out there into the world. And I think that this will help many women as well.
How do they sign up for it?
Oh, well, they can download it at my website, selfappeal.com. And actually, there are links for the course, and there's a description, a detailed description, and some testimonials if they're interested. There's also on my course a free audio, Love Your Body, Change Your Life, and then a shorter, affordable, less short course if they just want to have an introduction to me, Love Your Body, Change Your Life. So,
as well as your memoir, right? Can they buy it directly from your website as well?
Yes, they can buy the memoir from my website. They can get an autographed copy. They can get an e-version, which is inexpensive. And also, if they're so inclined, they can check out my DVD that I published a number of years ago, Striptease for Real Women. There's actually 10 women of every age and size and shape, and we're doing some pretty PG-rated stuff that women could do in the privacy of their home if they're looking for some sexy moves or something that they may want to use.
Yeah, totally. It's never too old. One of the things that I felt very intrigued at, I studied for 6 years flamenco, which has its own sensuality. It's very deep and in the ground. But while I was at that school, they also had belly dancing, which I really, really liked. I just like, ooh, I love that. Yeah, so, I mean, everyone will have their thing that they will be attracted to, but yeah, totally. Go check it out today. And I want to thank you again for coming back to share this very, very important topic, Susan.
Well, you're very welcome, Christina. Thank you for having me.
You betcha. Thanks for coming to Savvy Business Radio.